So we have looked at one of Confucius's rituals, and as we have seen, what he is doing is taking a custom of the time, ancestral offerings in this case, and making it into a ritual. Making it into a ritual in which we, by entering it, can train ourselves to become different and better people. So let's look at contemporary society. Do we have customary things that could be made into rituals? Confucius would certainly say, yes, we do customs and habits all the time. And let me just give you a couple of examples, and most importantly, what it would mean for Confucius if we were to transform these into being rituals. So here's another very mundane example, and these are important because, again, if who we are is based upon the daily stuff that we do, it's also in that daily stuff that we could, from a Confucian point of view, become better human beings. So, a mundane example. You're coming home after a long day of work, a long, exhausting day of work. You make it home. Your partner has had an equally long, exhausting day of work. The children are getting home too. They've had a tough day at school. They are exhausted. They've got a whole bunch of homework that needs to be done that you're going to have to actually help them do on top of all the exhaustion and work that you have to do. You all get in. You're tired. You're angry. The little fights begin. Why didn't you take out the trash? Why didn't you do this? And all the little things where you sort of poke at each other just because you know it kind of can get under them because you're angry and you want to get at them. In other words, a typical end of the day family situation. And what do? Well, there is a custom, not yet a ritual, but a custom in which, well, you kind of have to sit down and eat together, and so you sit down and eat. So by custom at, to give a random time, 6 o'clock each evening, you all sit down as a family and eat. And, the fights continue, blah, blah, blah. So let's make it into a ritual, which is perfectly doable. It's just as we saw with Sammy, you can de facto create a ritual space without literally saying to people, okay, we're going to create a ritual space and we're going to do that Confucian thing of like role reversals and becoming a different person. Obviously, if you said that, that would be absurd. I mean, if I said that to Sammy, he wouldn't know what I was talking about. You also don't need to say it. You just do it. So here's what you would do in this example. You do something to change the situation. You do something to make it a ritual. But again, you don't have to say that. You do things like the following, and I'll pick examples that we kind of do bits of anyway, but now put them together as a ritual. You dim the lights. You light some candles. You smile and bring out some food. You use tones of voice to make it clear that all of the fights and angers and yelling and exhaustion that was just going on is now ended, and it's a new setting. And in the setting, you put down the food, you begin using different tones of voice, you kind of become a different person. And because we tend to be people who are very responsive, to put it politely, our emotions being dragged out, to put it in a Chinese way of speaking, in any situation, that immediately has an impact. And for that brief moment, everything is calm, everything is people are beginning to connect with each other, you begin talking about the day again, but now really talking about the day. I'm not just yelling at each other and saying how exhausted you are. You start talking through things. You even, once you're becoming good at this, you begin self-consciously taking on different roles. So if you were just yelling at the poor child, you're being the scolding parent, in other words, you take on a different role. You become the sympathetic friend. You say, oh yeah, by the way, how did today go when you're out on the playground, because your child has been having some problems with some friends, and you talk through like the interactions with the bully on the playground, and you're no longer the scolding adult, you're the friend, right? You change roles. And very quickly, by literally I mean like within 2 minutes, an entirely different setting is created, an entirely different set of moods are created, different roles are being created, and you begin to really sense each other. Now, at the minimum, you're calming down the chaos of 5 minutes ago, but now, of course, we need to take it to the next level because this is what Confucius would care about. Then you start working in that ritual, right? Simply making candles won't do it. you begin really working. You're not just taking on the different role with your child, you begin trying to sense what's really going on. Like, why was he so angry when he walked in the door? Something else is going on. But you don't ask him overtly because you're taking on a different role. You're the sympathetic friend. You're getting better and better at sensing what's really going on. You're getting better and better at sensing kind of the underlying tensions, which are just part of being in a family. They're true of every relationship. And you're beginning to work on them, kind of like we were doing before with Sammy, only now at a much more complex level, because you're doing this every night for something like an hour and a half, and you're training yourself to get better and better at sort of sensing things and sensing what roles to take on to alter those very dangerous or sometimes fragile relationships that you're falling into. And what otherwise, as we know from families, can be relationships, bad relationships, that can continue for decades. In that brief ritual space, an hour and a half, you begin to realize you can begin transforming things. Not totally, not fundamentally. The lights go out, you wash dishes, the fights begin again, but every single night you work on them. And if you're doing that, in the ritual space, in this as-if space, to use the term again, you are really becoming a different person and interacting with your family members in this complex way of trying to sense them. You're training yourself. You're training yourself. You're helping to train your children to sense how to do this too. And what were otherwise seeming to be intractable problems in the family become not only solvable, they become much more importantly altered in practice. Because the truth is, if we're messy people who fall into these ruts and patterns that define us, we're equally capable of breaking from them. We're equally capable, in other words, of becoming messy again, but therefore not simply messy as we were before, but messy in a positive way, where you actually are transforming yourself by these interactions to become better and better able to sense those around you and work with those around you. And what otherwise seems like this stable world and a stable set of relationships, including in all the dangerous ways that relationships can be stabilized, it becomes changeable and malleable and therefore workable. And you slowly start changing the family dynamics and everything else. All of which, of course, raises for us the next key question. So imagine we were to do this. In other words, start taking these customs, making them into rituals, and transforming ourselves. What then for Confucius would it mean to be a better person? What would it mean to be good, going back to that quote we saw before, where if you conquer yourself by submitting yourself to rituals, you can become good? Where, in other words, does all of this lead? That will be our next question, where we will ask, what, were we to spend our lives doing what Confucius is calling on us to do, what would it mean to become a good person from this perspective? And putting it even more dramatically, what type of a human being would we even become through this tremendous amount of work that he's calling on us to put ourselves through? As we will see, he will argue, and I think we should take it seriously, we are capable of becoming something far greater than what we usually tend to think, and by definition, something incomparably more responsive to the world than the ways we tend to live our lives if we keep buying into this notion that current habits and patterns are somehow our true self that we should always love, embrace, and never, ever change. Thank you.